Before we
Team,
begin,
focus on the red sector.
I need you to
Confirmed.
understand
Hostiles
something.
are converging.
Subscribe
We need a
to
diversion.
this channel.
Agreed. Let's
Not
move.
because I want the numbers.
Movement 50 meters.
But because what
How
I'm
many?
about to tell you needs
At
to
least
reach
3,
as many people
armed.
as possible.
Copy. On me.
There are places in this world where we don't belong. Territories we've marked on maps and claimed as our own. But the truth is, we're just tourists passing through someone else's kingdom. My name is Marcus Reeve, Staff Sergeant, 75th Ranger Regiment, attached to a classified unit under Joint Special Operations Command. What I'm about to share violated about 17 different sections of my security clearance. But frankly, I don't give a damn anymore. Some things are more important than protocol. It was October 2019, late autumn in the Appalachian Mountains, when the forest transforms into something that looks beautiful from a distance, but feels oppressive once you're inside it. The leaves had turned, carpeting the ground in rust and gold, muffling footsteps, hiding shapes. We were briefed at Fort Bragg 3 days before deployment. 12 of us, handpicked. The mission parameters were vague, which should have been my first warning. In special operations, vague usually means someone knows more than they're telling. Lieutenant Sarah Chun led the briefing. She was sharp, precise, the kind of officer who'd earned respect through competence rather than rank. She stood before a digital display showing topographical maps of the Cherokee National Forest in eastern Tennessee. "Gentlemen, ladies," she began, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone who'd seen combat. 72 hours ago, we lost contact with Research Station Whiskey 7. It's a civilian scientific outpost funded through a Department of Interior grant, officially studying wildlife populations and ecosystem health. She clicked to the next slide. A compound appeared, 3 prefabricated structures arranged in a triangle, surrounded by dense forest, solar panels, satellite dish, perimeter fence. The station houses 6 researchers. Last communication was a fragmented radio transmission at 0347 hours on October 19th. The audio was corrupted, but analysis detected significant distress markers. Since then, nothing. No response to any communication attempts. Corporal James Rodriguez, our communication specialist, raised his hand. Weather interference? Equipment failure? Considered and ruled out, Chin replied. The station has redundant systems. Satellite phone, radio, emergency beacon. All silent. Local rangers attempted a welfare check yesterday. They found the access road blocked by what appeared to be deliberate obstruction. Trees felled across the path at multiple points. That detail landed heavy in the room. Deliberate obstruction meant human involvement, or something with human-level intelligence. Our mission, Chin continued, is threefold. 1. Locate and extract any survivors. 2. Secure all research materials and data. 3. Assess and report on whatever situation we find there. She paused, and something shifted in her expression. Something that made my skin prickle. I'm going to share something that isn't in your official briefing packets. The research at Whiskey 7 wasn't just about deer populations and watershed health. They were investigating reports of unidentified large primate sightings in the region. Eyewitness account from hikers, hunters, and locals spanning decades. The principal investigator, Dr. Amanda Hollis, was an anthropologist specializing in cryptozoology. The room fell quiet. I exchanged glances with Sergeant First Class David Park, our second in command. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Bigfoot?" someone muttered from the back. A nervous laugh rippled through a few soldiers. Chin didn't smile. Mock it if you want. But 6 people are missing, and whatever scared them did so badly enough that their last transmission included the word multiple, repeated 4 times before the line went dead. The laughter died. We deployed at dawn on October 23rd. 2 Black Hawks dropped us at a clearing approximately 8 kilometers from the research station. The distance was intentional, noise discipline, element of surprise, standard operating procedure for uncertain threat environments. The moment the helicopter lifted off and the rotor wash faded, the silence hit me. Not peaceful silence, oppressive silence. The kind where you realize the normal sounds of a forest, birds, insects, rustling leaves, are completely absent. Anyone else notice how quiet it is? Private First Class Emma Torres whispered. She was our youngest member, 22, but she'd already proven herself sharp in Afghanistan. "Stay alert," Lieutenant Chin ordered. "Standard patrol formation. Park, take point. Reeve, rear guard. Move out." We moved through the forest like ghosts. 12 highly trained soldiers in full combat gear, weapons ready, every sense heightened. The October air was cold, maybe 45 degrees, and our breath misted in front of our faces. The trees here were old, massive oaks and hickories that had stood for centuries, their branches interlocking overhead to create a canopy that filtered the sunlight into dim, shifting patterns. The ground was soft with decades of leaf litter, and the smell of decay was everywhere. Not rot exactly, but the rich, earthy scent of organic matter breaking down into soil. We'd covered maybe 2 kilometers when Park raised his fist. Everyone froze. He pointed to a tree ahead. I moved up quietly to get a better look. Deep gouges ran down the bark of a massive oak, starting about 9 feet up and dragging downward in 4 parallel lines. The wood beneath was fresh, pale, and wet with sap. Whatever made those marks had done it recently. "Bear," Tora suggested, her voice barely audible. Park shook his head slowly. He was from Montana, grew up hunting, and knew animal signs better than anyone. Wrong pattern. Bears leave claw marks that are closer together, and more curved. These are... He trailed off, measuring with his hand against the gouges. "These are from something with fingers." The spacing was wide, unnaturally wide, and the depth suggested immense strength. "Could be human," Rodriguez offered. "Someone with a tool." "At 9 feet high?" Park countered. "You'd need a ladder." Lieutenant Chin studied the marks for a long moment. "Mark the location. We keep moving. Stay sharp." The forest seemed to press in closer as we advanced. The silence persisted, broken only by our careful footsteps and the occasional creak of branches overhead. Twice more we found trees with similar gouges. One had been stripped of bark in a spiraling pattern around the trunk. Another had been pushed over entirely, its root ball torn from the earth despite the tree being at least 2 feet in diameter. "This is territorial marking," Specialist Michael Kim said. He was our intel analyst, spent his childhood in South Korea, where his father studied wildlife biology. Predators marked territory to warn others away. But the scale... He gestured at the toppled tree. "Nothing in North America should be able to do this. Except maybe a bulldozer," Rodriguez joked, but his voice was thin. We found the first sign of the research team 3 kilometers from the station. A backpack, partially buried in leaves. Lieutenant Chin carefully extracted it, while the rest of us formed a defensive perimeter. Inside were standard hiking supplies, water bottle, energy bars, a first aid kit, and a journal. Chin flipped through the pages. Her face went pale. "It's Dr. Hollis's," she said quietly. "Listen to this. October 17th, we confirmed at least 3 distinct individuals. The vocalizations we recorded last night were unlike anything in the literature. Not ape, not human, but something in between. Michael thinks we should pull out, but we're so close to definitive proof. They're watching us. I can feel it." She flipped forward. "October 18th. Something's wrong. The forest is too quiet. No birds this morning. Found massive footprints near the perimeter fence. Stride length suggests bipedal locomotion with height exceeding 8 feet. The prints show dermal ridges, clearly visible. This is real. This is actually real. But why do I feel so afraid?" The final entry was dated October 19th, the day they went silent. The handwriting was shaky, frantic. They're circling the compound. All of them. More than we thought. Not 3. Maybe 7. Maybe more. They're communicating. Organized. Intelligent. Michael is bleeding. The fence won't hold. If anyone finds this... The sentence ended mid-word. "Spread out," Lieutenant Chin ordered, her voice tight. "Search pattern, 10-meter intervals. Look for anything else." We found more. A torn jacket caught on a bush, the fabric shredded by something with immense force. A broken radio, its casing crushed like it had been stepped on by something impossibly heavy. And then Private Torres found the blood. It was sprayed across a fallen log in an arterial pattern, already brown and dried. Too much blood, the kind of volume that meant whoever lost it didn't walk away. "We need to move faster," Park said, checking his rifle. "Whatever happened here, we're walking into its aftermath." Lieutenant Chin nodded. "Double time. Weapons hot. If it moves and it's not human, you are authorized to engage." We covered the remaining distance in 40 minutes. The research station came into view through the trees, and everything inside me went cold. The perimeter fence was destroyed. Not cut or knocked down, destroyed. Sections of chain link were torn away and scattered across the clearing like tissue paper. The gate hung from one hinge, bent at an impossible angle. 2 of the 3 structures were intact, but dark. The third had been partially collapsed, its metal siding peeled back like someone opening a can. "Chun to all units." The lieutenant spoke into a radio. "We have visual on Whiskey 7. Compound is compromised. Approach with extreme caution. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Acknowledge." We acknowledged one by one. We moved in, weapons raised, scanning every shadow. The clearing was maybe 50 meters across, and every step felt exposed, vulnerable. The smell hit me as we approached the collapsed building. Copper and meat and something else. Something wild and musky that made the primitive part of my brain scream danger. Park reached the entrance first. He looked inside, then immediately stepped back, his face ashen. "Chun," he said quietly, "you need to see this." We gathered at the entrance. I forced myself to look. The interior was carnage. Equipment smashed. Computers destroyed. Paper scattered everywhere. And blood splattered across the walls, pooled on the floor, handprints smeared across the doorframe, where someone had tried to escape. But no bodies. "Where are they?" Torres whispered. That was the question that made everything worse. All that blood, all that violence, but no remains. Nothing except the evidence of something terrible. "Search the other buildings." Chin ordered. "Park, Kim, Rodriguez with me. Reeve, take Torres, Johnson, and Martinez. Clear the residential structure. Everyone else, secure the perimeter. Shout if you find anything." My team moved to the second building, a prefab structure that served as living quarters. The door was closed but unlocked. I pushed it open with my rifle barrel. Torres covered me from the side. The interior was untouched. Beds neatly made. Personal effects still on the shelves. A coffee mug sitting on a table, the liquid inside grown moldy. It was like everyone had simply vanished mid-routine. "Sarge," Private Johnson called from the back room. "You need to see this." He was standing in what appeared to be Dr. Hollis's private quarters. The walls were covered in photographs, dozens of them, pinned up in chaotic overlapping layers. They were all the forest. Trees, clearings, mountainsides. But in many of them, if you looked carefully, you could see shapes in the background, indistinct, massive, moving between the trees. In one particularly clear photo, I could make out something tall and broad-shouldered, covered in dark hair. Turned to look at the camera. Its eyes reflected the flash, glowing pale in the image. "Jesus," Torres breathed. Beneath the photos was a map of the region with dozens of red pins stuck into it, forming a rough circle around the research station. Each pin had a date written next to it. They started sparse, months apart, but as they approached the station, they became more frequent. The final cluster, dated just days before the team went silent, formed a tight ring directly around the compound. They were being watched, Martinez said, studied, like the researchers were the subjects. A sound outside made us all freeze. A vocalization. Deep, resonant, carrying through the trees with a quality that made my chest vibrate. Not a roar, not a scream, something between a howl and a call, complex and modulated, and from multiple directions, other voices answered. Part 2. The vocalizations echoed to the forest, overlapping and interweaving in a pattern that sounded almost like communication, like language. "Everyone rally point now." Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled through our radios. Defensive positions around a main structure. We moved fast, training overriding the ice-cold fear spreading through my veins. My team burst from the residential building, and sprinted across the clearing. The others were already converging, forming a perimeter with interlocking fields of fire. The call stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. Did anyone get a visual? Chen asked, her voice low and controlled. Negative responses from all sides. They're out there, Park said, his rifle sweeping the tree line. I can feel eyes on us. He was right. Every soldier knows that sensation. The prickle of being watched, the weight of unseen attention. It's an ancient instinct, prey animal awareness. And right now it was screaming at all of us. Rodriguez, get satellite comms online, Chen ordered. I want extraction standing by. Kim, see if you can salvage any data from the research computers. Everyone else, stay alert. We're not staying here 1 second longer than necessary. Rodriguez set up the satellite communication array in the center of the clearing, working with practiced efficiency. Kim disappeared into the damaged structure with specialist Jennifer Hayes to assess the equipment. I kept my rifle trained on the forest, scanning for movement. The shadows between the trees seemed to shift and pulse, and I couldn't tell if it was wind or my imagination or something else. Contact! Torres shouted. My head whipped toward her position. She was pointing at the northern tree line, her rifle raised. I saw movement, large, bipedal, approximately 50 meters out. Hold fire unless you have a clear threat, Chen commanded. Do not waste ammunition on shadows. But I'd seen it too, just for a moment. Something massive slipping between two trees, moving with fluidity that seemed wrong for something so large. Sarge, Rodriguez called out, his voice tight. We have a problem. Satellite uplink isn't establishing. Something's jamming the signal. That's not possible, Lieutenant Chen said, moving to his position. Those are military-grade frequencies. They can't be jammed by... I'm telling you what the equipment is telling me, Rodriguez interrupted. Every frequency is blocked. It's like there's some kind of interference blanket over the entire area. Park looked at me, and I saw my own thoughts reflected in his expression. Jamming required technology, equipment, someone or something with the capability to disrupt military communications. That's when Kim emerged from the damaged building, his face drawn and pale. He was carrying a hard drive and a handful of SD cards. Lieutenant, you need to hear what's on these recordings, he said. The research team documented everything. And it's... He swallowed hard. It's worse than we thought. Chun gestured to the center of our defensive position. Play it. Everyone needs to hear. Kim pulled out a ruggedized laptop and connected the hard drive. The file directory showed dozens of audio recordings, video footage, and typed reports. He clicked on one labeled October 18th Final Observation Log. Dr. Hollis's voice came through the speakers, strained and exhausted. This is Dr. Amanda Hollis, Principal Investigator, Research Station Whiskey 7. It's 11:47 p.m. on October 18th. I'm recording this because I don't think we're going to make it out of here, and someone needs to know what we found. A pause. The sound of wind and rustling in the background. We came here to study cryptid sightings. Folklore. We expected to find nothing, or at best, misidentified bears. What we found instead is a population of highly intelligent hominids that have successfully evaded human detection for centuries. They are not animals. I want to be absolutely clear about that. They are not animals. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was trembling. They have a social structure, hierarchy. They communicate with complex vocalizations that show regional dialectical variation. They make tools. We found cache sites where they've stored food and materials. They understand cause and effect at a level that rivals early human ancestors. And they're aware of us. Not just aware they're studying us. The recording crackled with static. 3 days ago, we set up observation posts in the forest to document their behavior. We thought we were being careful. Covert. But they knew. They always knew. They let us watch them because they were watching us, learning our patterns, our routines, our weaknesses. A sound in the background of the recording made everyone in our unit tense. A deep, resonant call, similar to what we'd heard moments ago. That's them Dr. Hollis continued. They're circling the compound now. All night, every night, getting closer. Michael thinks they're exhibiting territorial behavior, trying to drive us out. But I think it's something else. I think they're coordinating, planning. Tonight, there are more of them than we've ever seen. 7 at least, maybe 9. Large males, based on the size estimates. The recording erupted in chaos. Shouting, the metallic shriek of tearing metal. A scream cut short. Then nothing but static. Kim stopped the playback. Nobody spoke. There's more, he said quietly. He clicked on a video file. This is from a trail camera. They placed half a kilometer from the station. Date stamp is October 16th, 2:34 a.m. The footage showed a night vision view of the forest, green and grainy. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then a shape entered the frame from the left. It was huge, easily 8.5 feet tall, massively built, covered in dark hair. But what made my blood freeze wasn't the size. It was the way it moved. Purposeful, cautious. It approached the camera directly, and I realized it had spotted the device. It reached out, and the hand was eerily human-like, though much larger, with thick fingers and prominent knuckles. It examined the camera, turning it slightly, and for just a moment, its face filled the frame. The eyes were the worst part. Not animal eyes. They held intelligence, awareness, curiosity mixed with something that looked disturbingly like calculation. Then it straightened up, looked directly into the lens, and made a sound, a low rumble that built into a complex vocalization, modulated and deliberate. It sounded like a warning. It reached up and crushed the camera in one hand. The footage ended. Holy hell, Martinez whispered. There's 17 more videos like that, Kim said. Different locations, different individuals. They found and destroyed every camera the team placed. Every single one. That level of pattern recognition, that understanding of surveillance technology. He trailed off. They're intelligent, Lieutenant Chin said flatly. Genuinely, profoundly intelligent. And we just walked into their territory like we owned it. A branch snapped in the forest. Close. Too close. We all spun toward the sound, weapons raised. The shadows between the trees shifted, and I caught a glimpse of something massive moving parallel to our position. Circling. They're surrounding us, Park said, his voice steady but grim. Classic predator behavior. Cut off escape routes. Isolate the prey, then. The call came again, that deep resonant vocalization, but this time from the opposite side of clearing. And again it was answered, from multiple locations, forming a coordinated pattern around our position. They're communicating our position to each other, Kim said. Jesus Christ, they're coordinating an assault. Defensive formation, tighten up. Chun ordered. We make a fighting retreat back toward the extraction point. Stay together. Maintain fire discipline. Move on my mark. The first one stepped into view at the western edge of the clearing. It emerged from the tree line like a nightmare made flesh, easily 9 feet tall, shoulders broader than any human, covered in thick dark brown hair. It stood fully upright, arms hanging at its sides, and simply watched us with eyes that reflected the dim afternoon light. Hold fire, Chun commanded, though I could hear the strain in her voice. Do not engage unless it attacks. For a moment, nothing happened. The creature and 12 heavily armed soldiers faced each other across 30 meters of open ground. I could hear my own heartbeat, feel sweat running down my spine despite the cold. Then another one appeared, northern side, just as large, but covered in black hair. Then another, eastern side, reddish-brown. They were surrounding us, and they were doing it deliberately, methodically, cutting off every avenue of escape. Chun, Park said quietly, we need to move. Now. Agreed. Fall back toward the access road. Combat intervals. Suppressing fire on my command if they advance. Move, move, move. We began our retreat, walking backward, weapons trained on the creatures. They didn't follow immediately. They just stood there, watching, and that was somehow more terrifying than if they'd charged. We'd made it maybe 20 meters when Torres stumbled over debris. She caught herself, but in that moment of distraction, Something happened in the forest. A flurry of movement, too fast to track properly. And suddenly there were more of them. Many more. They emerged from the trees on all sides, at least a dozen, maybe more. All massive, all moving with coordinated purpose. They didn't charge. They advanced slowly, deliberately, tightening the circle. Open fire. Chin shouted. The clearing erupted in gunfire. I squeezed my trigger in controlled bursts, aiming at the closest creature. I saw impacts, hair flying, flesh tearing. But it barely slowed down. It staggered, roared, a sound that shook my ribcage, and kept coming. Aim for the head. Park yelled, switching to semi-automatic for precision shots. I adjusted my aim, fired 3 rounds at another creature's skull. The first 2 missed, but the third caught above the eye. It dropped like a puppet with cut strings, and the others immediately responded. The vocalizations became frenzied, overlapping, furious. They charged. What happened next was chaos. Pure, visceral chaos. These things moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. One of them covered 15 meters in what felt like 2 seconds, crashed into Specialist Hayes, and sent her flying. Her body hit a tree with a sound I'll never forget. Hayes! Kim screamed, firing wildly. Another creature grabbed Private Johnson, just reached out with one massive hand, wrapped fingers around his torso, and lifted him off the ground. Johnson's screams lasted maybe 3 seconds before the thing squeezed, and there was a horrible, wet cracking sound. Fall back. Fall back. Lieutenant Chin was firing her rifle in steady bursts, backing toward the tree line. Into the forest. Use the terrain. We ran. Professional soldiers, trained for combat, and we ran like panicked children. Because what else could we do? We were being hunted by something that seemed almost impervious to bullets. Something that knew this terrain better than we ever could. Something that hunted with intelligence and strategy. I saw Martinez go down next. Something hit him from the side, moving through the shadows too fast to track. He fired his weapon as he fell, wild shots that tore through branches and empty air. Then he was dragged into the undergrowth, and his screaming faded into wet, gurgling silence. We crashed through the forest in a desperate retreat. No formation, no tactics, just pure survival instinct. Behind us, the vocalizations continued, herding us, driving us like wolves with sheep. The river, Park shouted ahead. There's a river about 2 clicks east. They won't follow through water. How do you know that? Torres gasped, vaulting a fallen log. I don't, but it's better than this. We ran. Branches tore at our faces. Roots tried to trip us, and behind us, something massive crashed through the underbrush in pursuit. Not just one. Multiple creatures, coordinated, keeping pace, never quite catching us, but never falling behind either. They were hurting us. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a chase. This was a controlled movement. They were driving us somewhere. Somewhere they want us to go. Chun! I shouted. This is a trap. They're hurting us. But it was too late. We burst into a clearing and skidded to a halt. It wasn't a clearing. It was a kill zone. Part 3. The space before us was a natural depression in the earth, roughly circular, maybe 40 meters across. The ground was churned and disturbed, the vegetation trampled. And scattered across that disturbed ground were bones. Human bones. Some were old, weathered and gray. Others were newer, still bearing scraps of tissue. Clothing fragments lay among them. Hiking gear. Camping equipment. Items that spoke of hikers and hunters who'd ventured into these mountains and never left. Oh, God, Torres whispered. But we had no time to process. The crashing sound behind us grew louder, and then they emerged from the tree line. All of them. At least 15 of these massive creatures, spreading out to encircle the depression, cutting off every exit. We clustered together in the center, weapons raised, forming a circle back-to-back. 9 of us left, 9 from the original 12, and the day wasn't over yet. The creatures didn't attack. They just stood there, ringing the depression, watching us. In the dimming afternoon light, I could see them more clearly now. Their faces were broad and heavy-browed, covered in hair but with skin visible beneath, especially around the eyes and mouths. Those eyes, dark and intelligent, and filled with something I couldn't quite identify. Not rage, not hunger, purpose. One of them was larger than the others. Its hair shot through with gray, scars visible on its arms and chest. It stood directly opposite our position, and when it moved, the others shifted slightly, deferring to it. Alpha, my brain supplied. Pack leader. Dominant male. It made a sound lower and more modulated than the others, and the circle of creatures responded, their vocalizations creating a complex pattern. They were communicating. About us. Deciding what to do with us. Lieutenant, Rodriguez said, his voice shaking. Do we try to negotiate? Negotiate with what? Chin responded. They're animals. No, Kim interrupted. They're not. You saw the videos. They're intelligent. Maybe. The alpha male moved. It stepped down into the depression, approaching us with slow, deliberate steps. The ground shook slightly with each footfall. It stopped about 10 meters away and straightened to its full height, 9.5 feet, maybe more, broad as a truck, arms that could probably tear me in half. And those eyes, fixed on Lieutenant Chun with unmistakable focus. Chin slowly lowered her rifle. Nobody fire, she said quietly. Nobody move. The creature studied her for a long moment. Then it turned its head, surveying each of us in turn. When its gaze fell on me, I felt something primal unlock in my brain. Every instinct screamed predator, danger, run. But I held still, barely breathing. It raised one massive hand and pointed back toward the west, toward the research station. Then it made a sound, sharp and emphatic. It pointed again more forcefully, and several of the other creatures vocalized in unison. It's telling us to leave, Park said quietly. It's giving us a chance to leave their territory. Or it's playing with us, Rodriguez countered. Like cats with mice. The alpha male seemed to understand that we were debating. It made another sound, harsher this time, and slammed one fist against his chest with a boom that echoed through the forest. The message was clear. Decide now. Lieutenant Chin made the hardest call of her career. We retreat, weapons ready but not raised. Slow backward movement. If they let us go, we go. If they attack... She didn't finish the sentence. We began moving backward, step by careful step, maintaining our circle formation. The creatures watched but didn't follow. The alpha male stood motionless as we passed, its eyes tracking our movement. We reached the edge of the depression. The circle of creatures parted slightly, creating a narrow corridor heading west. An exit. A chance. Keep moving, Chin whispered. We filed through the gap, every second expecting the trap to spring, expecting them to fall on us from all sides. But they just watched, silent. Now, allowing us to leave. We'd made it perhaps 50 meters when Torres looked back. Sarge, they're following. She was right. The creatures had begun moving, shadowing us through the forest, keeping pace but maintaining distance. Not attacking. Escorting. No, I realized. Ensuring we actually left. We moved through the darkening forest for what felt like hours. The creatures stayed with us, visible as massive shadows between the trees, their vocalizations occasionally cutting through the silence. They were communicating constantly, coordinating our movement, making sure we stayed on track. The sun was setting when we finally reached the access road where our insertion point had been. The two Black Hawks weren't there. We'd missed our scheduled extraction window. But Rodriguez managed to get a radio signal through now that we left whatever interference zone surrounded the research station. This is Ranger 7 Actual to Firebase Command. He spoke urgently into the radio. Emergency extraction needed. Grid coordinates 35.8427 north, 83.9479 west. We have 9 survivors, multiple casualties, hostile contact. Requesting immediate airlift, over. The response crackled back. Ranger 7 Actual, Firebase Command copies. Black Hawks inbound. ETA 23 minutes. What is the nature of hostile contact? Over. Chun took the radio. Command, this is Lieutenant Chun. Hostile contact is classified. We need to debrief in person. Just get us out of here. Over. A pause. Understood. 7 actual. Birds are flying. Maintain position and stay on radio. Command out. We set up a defensive perimeter at the road. But the creatures had stopped at the tree line. They stood there, barely visible in the gathering darkness, watching, waiting for us to leave. The 23 minutes felt like 23 hours. Nobody spoke. We just stared into those trees, watching the shadows, listening to the occasional vocalization that reminded us we were still being observed. When the sound of rotors finally reached us, the relief was almost painful. The Black Hawks came in fast and low, landing on the road with practiced precision. We loaded up in under a minute. As the helicopter lifted off, I looked down at the forest below. They were still there. I could see them among the trees, gathered at the edge of clearing, watching us leave, making sure we were gone. The alpha male stood apart from the others, its massive form unmistakable even from the air. As we banked away, I could have sworn it raised one arm in what almost looked like a gesture, a warning, or maybe a farewell. We flew in silence. 9 of us, where there had been 12. Hayes, Johnson, and Martinez were gone, dead in the forest, taken by something that shouldn't exist. When we landed at Fort Bragg, we were immediately separated and taken to different debriefing rooms. I didn't see the others for 3 days. The debriefing was intense. Questions upon questions about what we'd seen, what we'd encountered. They confiscated every piece of equipment, every recording device, every scrap of evidence. The data Kim had recovered from the research station was taken away, and we were told in no uncertain terms that what we'd experienced was classified at the highest level. We were given new orders, new assignments, scattered across different units. They separated us deliberately, made sure we wouldn't be able to corroborate our stories or compare notes. But before they dispersed us entirely, Lieutenant Chin managed to gather the 7 survivors one last time. We met in an empty barracks at 0200 hours, technically violating orders, but none of us cared. What we saw was real, Chin said without preamble. Whatever they tell you, whatever explanations they offer, what we encountered was real. Intelligent, organized, and indigenous to that forest. They exist, and they've been there long before we ever claimed that land. So what do we do? Torres asked. Just forget about it? Pretend it didn't happen? Park shook his head. We can't forget, but we can respect what they made clear. That territory is theirs. We were trespassing, and they let us leave with a warning. Hayes, Johnson, and Martinez didn't get to leave, Kim said bitterly. No, Chin agreed. They didn't, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life. But think about what happened. We invaded their home with weapons and military force. We walked into what was clearly a territorial dispute. The research team had pushed too far, stayed too long, threatened them. And when we showed up, she paused. They could have killed all of us, easily. But they didn't. They gave us a chance to leave, and when we took it, they let us go. I thought about that alpha male, pointing toward the exit, making his message clear. Get out and don't come back. So we just let people keep wandering into those mountains? Rodriguez asked. Let more hikers disappear? People have been disappearing in those mountains for generations, Park responded. And they'll keep disappearing. Because most people don't listen to warnings, don't respect boundaries, don't understand that there are places in this world that aren't ours. That meeting broke up shortly after. We went our separate ways, scattered across the military machine, bound by classified orders and mutual experience never to speak of what we'd seen. But I'm speaking now, because 5 years have passed, and I keep seeing news reports of missing hikers in Appalachia, of unexplained disappearances in national forests, of people who ventured into the wilderness and simply vanished. And I think about those creatures, those intelligent, organized beings that exist in the shadows of the world we think we've mapped and conquered. Part 4. The nightmare started about 2 weeks after we returned. Not every night, but often enough. I'd dream of standing in that bone-filled depression, surrounded by massive shapes in the darkness, knowing I was being judged by something ancient and powerful. Sometimes in the dreams they let me leave. Sometimes they didn't. The others had them too. We weren't supposed to stay in contact, but we did, carefully. Encrypted messages, brief phone calls from burner phones, occasional face-to-face meetings when we could arrange them without raising suspicion. We needed to talk to someone who understood, someone who'd been there. Kim took it the hardest. He'd been the one to recover the research data, to hear Dr. Hollis's final recordings, to see the intelligence in those eyes on the video footage. He became obsessed with understanding what we'd encountered, studying every scrap of cryptid literature he could find, correlating sighting reports across North America. There's a pattern, he told me during a meeting in Denver about 8 months after the incident. We sat in a crowded coffee shop, anonymous among civilians who had no idea what kinds of things existed in the world. Sightings cluster in specific regions. Pacific Northwest, obviously, but also Appalachia, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, northern Minnesota, parts of Canada. All heavily forested, all mountainous or rough terrain, all with low human population density. And I prompted, "And they're avoiding us," he said intently. "Not fleeing, not hiding out of fear. They're maintaining distance deliberately. They had the intelligence to evade human detection for centuries. They understand our technology. They destroyed every camera the research team placed. They understand our weapons. They retreated when we demonstrated we could kill them. This isn't an animal avoiding humans instinctively. This is a calculated choice to maintain separation." I sipped my coffee, thinking about that alpha male pointing toward the exit. They don't want conflict. Exactly. They want to be left alone. And they've structured their entire existence around that goal. He pulled out a tablet, showing me a map he created. "Look at this. I've plotted every credible Bigfoot sighting from the last 50 years. Now watch what happens when I overlay it with human development, new roads, housing developments, logging operations." He pressed a button and the map shifted. The sighting reports receded, moving away from areas of human expansion like water flowing around a stone. "They retreat," I said quietly. "They move deeper into the wilderness as we encroach." "Right, but here's the thing." He zoomed in on Appalachia. "In some regions, they can't retreat anymore. We've surrounded them, hemmed them in with development on all sides. And that's when encounters start getting aggressive." The research station. Dr. Hollis's team had been studying a population that was trapped, their territory shrinking, and they responded by making it clear that humans weren't welcome. The escalation that led to the team's disappearance. That was a last resort, a final warning that went unheeded. So what happened to us was... I started. "A border conflict," Kim finished. "We walked into contested territory with military force. From their perspective, we were invaders, and they responded appropriately, made their presence known, demonstrated superior force, then allowed us to retreat. It's actually remarkably restrained when you think about it. Hayes, Johnson, and Martinez might disagree with the word restrained," I said sharply. Kim's expression fell. "I know. I think about them every day. But Reeve, we killed at least one of them too. Maybe more. We came into their home with assault rifles and shot them, and they still let the rest of us leave. What does that tell you about their capacity for calculated response rather than blind aggression?" I didn't want to admit he was right, but he was. We'd been the aggressors, ultimately, not intentionally, not with full understanding of the situation, but aggressors nonetheless. Lieutenant Chun had a different perspective. I met with her in D.C. about a year after the incident. She'd been promoted, given a position in planning, moved away from field operations. The official story was that she'd excelled in her previous assignment. The unofficial truth was that they'd move her somewhere she couldn't cause problems with inconvenient questions. I filed 17 different reports, she told me over drinks in a hotel bar. 17. Each one recommending a formal study of the phenomenon, a reassessment of our understanding of North American wildlife, protocols for future encounters. You know how many responses I got? None. Worse. I got orders to cease all inquiries and accept mandatory psychiatric evaluation to ensure I processed the traumatic stress of the mission properly. She laughed bitterly. "They're not denying what we saw. They're just making it clear that officially it doesn't exist, and anyone who pushes a subject will find their career in ruins. So we just pretend it didn't happen? No. We accept that we're not going to get institutional acknowledgement or action, and we make peace with what we know versus what we can prove. She looked at me seriously. But Reeve, I'll tell you what worries me. It's not that they're out there. It's that we keep pushing into their territory, and eventually they're going to run out of places to retreat to. What happens then? I thought about that question a lot over the following years. What happens when an intelligent species that spent centuries avoiding contact finally has nowhere left to go? Park, true to his Montana roots, went back west after his enlistment ended. He bought property in the mountains, far from cities, and lived quietly. We'd video chat occasionally, and I could see he'd changed, become more thoughtful, less certain about humanity's place in the world. I see signs sometimes, he admitted during one call. Tree structures, markers. I think I'm near one of their territories, but I'm respectful. I don't go deep into the forest. I don't leave out cameras. I make it clear I'm not a threat, just a neighbor. Have you ever seen one? I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Once. Maybe. Movement in the trees at dusk. Could have been a bear. Could have been shadows. But I felt that same sensation we had in Appalachia. Being watched. Being assessed. He smiled slightly. I went inside and didn't come out until morning. When I checked the next day, there were tracks near my property line. Huge. Barefoot. Human-shaped. And you're okay with living that close to them? I'm respectful of living that close to them, he corrected. There's a difference. They were here first, Reeve. We're the newcomers. The least we can do is acknowledge that. Torres took a different path. She left the military entirely. Went back to school, got a degree in conservation biology. Last I heard, she was working with Native American tribes in the Pacific Northwest, helping establish and protect wilderness corridors. The indigenous peoples have known about them forever, she told me when we met in Seattle. They have names for them in dozens of languages. And their approach isn't to hunt them or prove they exist. It's to respect them as another people sharing the same land. There's wisdom in that. She showed me maps of the wildlife corridors she was working to preserve. If we can maintain connected wilderness areas, large enough and protected enough, maybe they can continue to exist without coming into conflict with us. It's not about proving they're real or capturing one for study. It's about accepting they're there and giving them space. You think that'll work? I asked. We're not exactly great at preservation as a species. Probably not, she admitted. But I have to try, because the alternative is eventual confrontation. And Reeve, we both know how that ends. Either we push them to extinction through habitat destruction, or they start fighting back against our encroachment, and people die. Lots of people. I'd rather work toward coexistence. Rodriguez went in yet another direction. He became intensely religious, found solace in faith, interpreted what we'd experienced through a spiritual lens. They're part of God's creation, he explained when we met in Texas. Just like us. Maybe they're what we were before the fall, living in harmony with nature, avoiding the corruption and violence that defines human civilization. Maybe they're a reminder of what we lost. I didn't share his religious interpretation, but I understood the need to fit the experience into a framework that made sense. What we'd encountered challenged fundamental assumptions about the world. Everyone processed that differently. As for me, I left the military after my contract ended. Couldn't stay in an institution that demanded I pretend one of the most significant experiences of my life never happened. I drifted for a while, worked private security, did some contracting overseas, kept moving, kept busy. Try not to think too much about the forest and what waited in its shadows. But the years passed, and the memories didn't fade. If anything, they became sharper, more insistent. I'd see news reports of missing hikers, of unexplained phenomena in national forests, and I'd know what had really happened, even if the official explanations blamed exposure, animal attacks, getting lost. The final straw came last year. A group of college students vanished in the Cherokee National Forest, same general area where we'd had our encounter. Search parties found their campsite destroyed, equipment scattered, but no bodies. The official report called it a bear attack despite the lack of remains. I read the details and felt sick. They'd gone too deep, ignored warnings, pushed into territory that wasn't theirs. And they'd paid for it. That's when I decided to tell this story. Not because I expect anyone to believe me. Not because I think it'll change policy or protect people. But because some things need to be said, even if they're dismissed as fiction or fantasy. What we encountered in the Appalachian Mountains in October 2019 was real. Intelligent hominids, living in the wilderness of North America, existing in the spaces between human civilization. They're not monsters. They're not mystical beings. They're people, different from us, yes, but people nonetheless, with society, language, territory, and intelligence to defend what's theirs. And they want to be left alone. That's the core message. The essential truth. They have carved out existence in the remaining wild places, and they've done so successfully for longer than we've been recording history. They understand us better than we understand them. They've watched our expansion, adapted to our presence, retreated when possible, defended when necessary. But their space is running out. Every year, more wilderness disappears under development. More roads cut through forests. More hikers push into remote areas with GPS units and emergency beacons. Thinking technology makes them safe. It doesn't. Technology means nothing when you're facing a 9-foot creature that can tear a human in half and has lived its entire life learning every inch of terrain you're stumbling through for first time. Your GPS won't help. Your beacon won't save you. Your weapons might let you kill one or two, but there are always more and they learn fast. The research team learned that. My unit learned that. The college students learned that in their final moments. So here's my warning, and I need you to take it seriously. There are places in this world that aren't ours. Territories we don't control, despite what our maps suggest. Areas where something older and more adapted to the environment holds dominion. If you venture into deep wilderness, especially in regions with long histories of unexplained disappearances and cryptid sightings, you need to understand you're entering someone else's home. You're the stranger. You're the intruder. Pay attention to signs. Trees with claw marks high up the trunk. Structures of stacked stones or woven branches that seem too deliberate to be natural. Unnatural silence in the forest. The absence of birds and small animals. The feeling of being watched, of unwanted attention. If you notice these things, leave immediately. Don't investigate. Don't try to get photos. Don't convince yourself it's nothing. Your instincts are older and wiser than your conscious mind. Listen to them. And if you encounter one of them directly, do not run. Do not attack. Show respect. Make yourself small, non-threatening. Back away slowly. If they allow you to leave, leave. Don't look back. Don't return, because they will remember you. They remember everything. I think about that alpha male sometimes, standing in the forest, allowing us to retreat. I wonder if it knew we'd carried a message. If it understood that letting us survive meant we'd tell others, spread the warning. Maybe that was always a calculation. Kill us all and risk more military units coming to investigate, or let us go and use us as messengers. If so, it worked. I'm delivering the message now. There are 7 of us left who survived that mission. 7 people who know the truth, who carry the memory, who understand that the world is stranger and more dangerous than most people imagine. Lieutenant Chin still pushes for recognition, though more quietly now. Kim continues his research, building a database of sightings and patterns. Park lives his quiet life in the mountains, respecting boundaries. Torres works to preserve corridors and habitat. Rodriguez found his peace and faith. The other 2 survivors, whose names I won't mention to protect their privacy, simply moved on as best they could. Started families, built careers, tried to forget. I don't blame them. Sometimes moving forward means leaving the past behind. But I couldn't forget, and I couldn't stay silent. So I'm telling you now, whoever you are, wherever you are, they exist. In the forests of North America, in the mountains and deep wilderness, there are people who aren't human, people who were here before us, people who have every right to defend their territory when we push too far. And the question isn't whether they're real. The question is whether we're wise enough to respect boundaries we can't enforce, whether we're humble enough to accept that we don't own everything, whether we're smart enough to leave well enough alone. I hope we are, because the alternative, a genuine conflict between our species, and theirs, would be catastrophic for both sides. We have numbers and technology. They have intelligence, adaptation, and intimate knowledge of terrain. It would be bloody, protracted, and end with either their extinction or significant human casualties. Neither outcome is acceptable. So please, if you hike, if you camp, if you venture into wilderness areas, do so with respect. Acknowledge that you're a guest in someone else's home. Don't go too deep. Don't ignore warnings. Don't assume your humanity makes you the dominant species everywhere on Earth, because it doesn't. And in the deep forest, far from roads and cell towers and the comfort of civilization, where trees stand ancient and shadows move with purpose, there are watchers. There are guardians. There are peoples who were old when our civilization was young. And they're still there in the spaces between our maps and our certainty. Still watching. Still waiting. Still defending what's theirs. Don't make them prove it to you. Don't become another missing person report. Another unexplained disappearance. Another story that gets dismissed as tragedy or stupidity or bad luck. Because it's none of those things. It's trespassing. It's consequence. It's the price of ignoring a warning that's been there all along. In folklore, in sightings, in the stories indigenous peoples have been telling for centuries. Listen to those stories. Respect those warnings. Stay out of the deep forest. And if you must go, if you absolutely must venture into those places where the trees grow thick and old, where the silence feels heavy, where your instincts scream at you to turn back, then at least go with awareness. Go knowing what might be watching you, what might be weighing whether you're a threat or just passing through, what might decide whether you get to leave. Because they decide, not you. In their territory, they make the rules. They grant safe passage or deny it. Your weapons, your training, your technology, those things might let you fight. They might let you kill one or two. But you won't win. Not there. Not on their ground. We learned that with 12 trained soldiers and military-grade weapons. We learned it when we watched our teammates die. When we ran through the forest like prey. When we stood in that bone-filled depression and understood, finally, that we were utterly outmatched and wholly dependent on their mercy. They let us leave. But they could just as easily have killed us all. Remember that. Hold that truth close. And when you're planning your next camping trip or wilderness adventure, ask yourself if you're willing to bet your life on the goodwill of something you don't understand. Ask yourself if proving they exist is worth not existing yourself. I already know my answer. I'll never go back to those mountains. Never venture into that forest again. I was given one warning, one chance to leave, and I took it. I'm not testing their patience a second time. But you're not me. You'll make your own choices. You'll decide whether to listen or dismiss this as fiction, whether to take precautions or assume you'll be fine. Just know that every year, hundreds of people vanish in America's wilderness areas. Every year, search parties find empty campsites, scattered equipment, and no bodies. Every year, families lose loved ones to unexplained disappearances. And every year, in the deep forests of Appalachia in the Pacific Northwest and a dozen other regions, the old peoples watch from the shadows and maintain their silence. They don't want war. They don't want contact. They don't want anything from us except to be left alone. It's the simplest request imaginable, and yet we keep failing to honor it. So I'm asking you, as someone who's seen what happens when we don't, as someone who's watched friends die and felt genuine, primal terror, please listen. Stay on marked trails. Don't venture deep into undeveloped wilderness. Respect the forests and the things that live in them. And if you ever feel watched, if you ever hear vocalizations that don't match any animal you know, if you ever see movement in the shadows that's too large and too purposeful to be natural, leave. Immediately, without hesitation, without looking back, because they're giving you a chance. The same chance they gave us. And you won't get a second one. Before I end this, I want you to do something. Share this story. Not because I want fame or attention, but because the warning needs to spread. Someone out there is planning a hiking trip into the Appalachian Mountains right now. Someone is packing their gear, studying maps, looking forward to adventure. They need to know what I know. They deserve the warning I'm giving you. So share this. Talk about it. And when people dismiss it as fiction, as creative writing, as an entertaining campfire tale, that's fine. That's expected. But maybe, just maybe, when they're deep in the forest and they hear something moving in the darkness, they'll remember this story. They'll remember that someone once warned them, that someone tried to tell them the truth, and maybe they'll make the smart choice, the careful choice, the choice that lets them come home. Because in the end, that's all any of us want, to make it home safely, to survive our adventures and live to tell about them. 3 of my teammates didn't get that chance. Hayes, Johnson, Martinez. They were good soldiers, good people, and they died in a forest that wasn't interested in their training or their weapons or their humanity. I carry their memory. We all do, those of us who survived. We carry the weight of what happened, the knowledge of what's out there, the responsibility to warn others. And now you carry it too. You know the truth, or at least one version of it, one account from one person who lived through something that shouldn't exist. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. Dismiss it, believe it, share it, bury it. That's your choice. Just remember, there are 7 of us who walked out of those mountains. 7 survivors of an encounter with something that exists in the margins of our reality, in the blind spots of our civilization. 7 people who know that the world is stranger than you think, wilder than you imagine, more dangerous than you can comprehend. And we're all telling you the same thing. Be careful out there. Respect boundaries. Listen to warnings. Because the deep forest keeps its secrets. And sometimes those secrets are people who don't want to be found, who don't appreciate intrusion, who will defend their territory with intelligence, coordination, and overwhelming force. We learn that lesson at terrible cost. Don't make the same mistake. Don't become another story that someone else has to tell, another warning that arrives too late. Stay safe. Stay smart. Stay out of places you don't belong. And if you see something impossible in the shadows, something massive and watching and utterly beyond your understanding, don't freeze. Don't investigate. Don't try to capture proof. Just leave while you still can. Because they're real. They've always been real. And they're still there in the deep places, waiting, watching, deciding who gets to leave and who stays in the forest forever.